Welcome back to Rings, Gears, and Opinions. Today, Ken sits down with Lee Hurley for the second and final part of their conversation. Lee is an Army veteran, a race car driver, a race car builder, an engine builder, and a radio host. We hope you enjoy the conclusion of the Lee Hurley interview.
All right, Lee, we want to, you get back out of the military and you're back in Birmingham and you want to start being involved in racing again. And there's a mutual friend of ours we lost just a few short years ago by the name of Marvin Barber.
Yeah, quite a special person. That Marvin was what you would classify a man of men.
Yeah.
He
Elaborate on that for me.
He was just one of these people that was flamboyant. He was a ladies' man. He really enjoyed life. He worked at U.S. Steel and I'm sure made decent money. He always had a new car. And, I got involved with him. He knew Jack, my oldest brother.
Okay.
And there was a shop there in Central Park that was called Sparks Garage, which is kind of a place where all the local guys congregated at times. And Marvin had at one time bought this piece of junk open wheel dirt car from somebody. We put an old motor in it and he ran it a couple of times at Gadsden I really didn't particularly care for the dirt just because of the dirty. I mean,
right.
It's terrible. So Marvin says, hey, let's build a stock car for Birmingham. I said, who's going to build it for you? Well, you can build it. So Marvin funds this 55 Chevrolet that, I just did all sorts of stupid things to it. I mean, the motor was set over to the left side and down in a frame, and it had quarter elliptics on the back. It was so conglomerated thing that tilt front end on it.
Really?
It had Robert Mills did a paint job on this thing, and it had metal gold flake on the roof. I mean, it was a gorgeous car. 64 was the number on it.
Okay.
Had a big Marvin had bought a bunch of parts from Rocco and Cheater, and he bought this stroker kit that had a set of cast pistons. I said, I'm not really a fan of cast pistons. He says, well, let's put it all together. So we built this motor, and it had a Iskandarian camshaft in it. I mean, it was a beast. It really was. When you cranked it up, you knew that there was something different there.
Uh-huh.
And we ran this car at Birmingham 2 or 3 times, and I warmed the car up a couple of laps because Marvin was either late getting off work or something to get there. But anyhow, Marvin would run it, and he ran this thing down the front straightaway and into one, and it broke the piston and it wadded it up in the wall. I mean, there was nothing salvageable off this car because it was just so screwed up auxiliary.
Right. So, yeah.
And that sort of took Marvin out of the racing package for a while. He hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
Probably the next thing that happened is Mr. Clark. Billy Clark's dad called me and said Billy had bought this race car out in somewhere, and it wasn't complete, and it needed a motor, and it needed this, and it needed that. Would I be interested in doing it?
Now, were they involved in racing at all before
that? Not that I remember of any involvement. Billy might have been with us with the micros for a while, because Billy and Ray Putman were close friends. And, but Billy had never had a race car or anything to do with it.
Right. Now, And Mr. Clark owned a used car lot and the
Oh,
first
yeah.
Subaru dealer in Birmingham. So
He was
He had-
was a prominent car guy.
and yeah, that's right. Had a little money to spend.
He was one of the innovators. He sold people's cars and supported them.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that was his big Hall of Fame is he really took care of customers.
Right. Yeah.
Anyhow, I put this thing together for Billy, and never forget, this is a true story. But Billy was actually working for U.S. Steel and running a train or something.
See, when you told me that the other day, it just blows my mind because the Billy I knew, I cannot for the life of me put him at U.S. Steel.
I mean, and so we were going to run Birmingham on Friday night. Well, Billy says, well, I can't get off work.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, this is the first time we were going to run the car.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Actually, it's going to be the second time.
Okay.
The first time, this is a good part of the story.
All right.
He had bought this car from somewhere. It didn't come from Hueytown, but it came from somebody somewhere around here.
Okay.
But not necessarily. Anyhow, it was a '55 Chevrolet, and it had the old Ford truck rear end in it. That's what we always ran.
Okay.
And I built a motor and everything with it, and loaded it on a trailer, and we carried it to the fairgrounds on Friday night. Billy got in the car, and the car had 3 reverses and 1 forward. What had happened is when whoever built the car to start with put the rear end in upside down.
Wow.
So it actually turned the opposite direction.
Okay.
Well, nothing wrong with it, but
Right.
and so the three reverses were first, second, and third, but going to the rear end made it backwards. So we didn't get to run the car.
Okay.
We carried the car back home, and I corrected all the problems with it. And the car had never been driven or run or anything.
Okay.
I mean, not even out of the driveway.
Wow.
I don't even remember. I think we even pushed it on a trailer. So anyhow, we get ready to go the next Friday night, and Billy says, well, I can't get there. I can't get off work. I said, well, I'm going to take the car out there and let Evans inspect it and make sure everything's good on it. And I said, I might make a couple of laps in it just to see how it is.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, Ray Putman was the key cadet driver.
Yeah.
Winner. He ran number 1. And then Billy's car, because of his affiliation with Ray, was a 01.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Both of them looked alike, blue cars with a gold top on them or something. Anyhow, so we carried it out there, and I don't even get to make any practice laps with it. Got there late.
Well, remember, you don't really even practice laps anyway, right?
Well,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, that's later on in life. But anyhow, I got my helmet, my T-shirt, and my blue jeans.
Yeah.
So I crawl in the car and start on the rear of the heat race, and next thing I know is I run second to Ray in the heat race.
Wow.
Which was a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
So we get ready, we line up on the feature, and I start on the rear, and
You're having to do that because of points, I guess.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
the car was not, never been there.
I got you.
And that Gloor had some kind of deal about how you line them up. Anyhow,
Yep.
started on the rear, and we ran about, I think the features then were like 15 laps, or maybe there were 15 or 20 laps, but about halfway through, the next thing I know is I'm right here behind Ray again. And we run down into the number 1 corner, and I pass him. So actually win the race.
Do you really?
And that didn't go over well with Billy at all, or Ray.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we come back, and the next couple of weeks, I mean, Billy actually ran and outrun Ray several times. So I mean, the car was real competitive.
Right.
I had a knack about knowing how to make a car turn.
Where did that come from for you, do you think? I mean, did you understand the geometry? Did you truly understand what was going on? Or
yeah, I think I did, because of, believe it or not, micros and go-karts and things like that are really critical about chassis setups. And
that's the only way you can get them to turn, correct?
That's it. I mean, and they were real sensitive about that.
Right, yeah.
Without backing up, there's another story about the go-karts.
Okay.
Back in the 50s, it's in the 50s now, when I was working at Lonco, I built a go-kart out of tubing that was there.
Yeah.
And didn't have any money to put a straight rear axle under it, so it just had individual wheels that had a sprocket on it.
Okay.
On left and right. Well, this thing had 4 Power Products AH85s. They were out of the box. They were go-kart motors. They made 8.5 horsepower apiece. Had 2 on each wheel. Okay. One chain. The chain would go across the wheel, across the sprocket on one, go to the sprocket on the other one, and back around. 2 of them on the left, 2 of them on the right.
So you got an all-wheel drive.
Well, I ain't front-wheel drive.
Oh, okay, okay.
I got rear-wheel drive.
Okay, I got you. So, okay.
And at that time, Dixie Speedway was high pointed, and Freddie Fryer was one of the key people at that time, and he had old sedan, number 48 sedan, and he had set a lap record at Dixie Speedway that night. Well, this go-kart was really a PIA.
Right.
And I had never, ever had it to run on all 4 motors at the same time.
Okay.
For some stupid reason. And then to make it turn, if you were in the throttle on it and you run down in the corner, to make it turn, you had to kill the inside engines.
Right.
We had a button on the steering wheel that killed the two on the, and so that's how you made it turn.
No kidding.
And it wasn't any official or anything, but it ran faster than Freddie Fryer's lap record.
Wow.
The only time it ever ran.
Really?
What the truth is fixing to come out now. The motors actually belonged to Lonco.
Oh, okay.
they were sort of borrowed.
Oh, did so you had to put them back,
take the motors back off and put them in inventory. Put them back on customers' go-karts. So
statute of limitations is passed. I think.
That story is over. So, but that was one of the things I learned about chassis work, how to make things turn.
Okay, so you build this car. How do you build the turning ability in these cars at this time?
I know about, from my past in dealerships, I know about steering gearboxes. The Corvette's got a faster steering gearbox, and I use pieces like that, and I put all that stuff together.
Okay.
I know about how to make a bending the steering arms to make the Ackerman or the steering part of it. When you turn a wheel, the inside wheel's got to turn farther than the right side wheel. So all this stuff was just an accumulated over years. It
does, but then again, a lot of people weren't thinking in that, that realm.
And being involved in the dealership, I had accessibility to springs and stuff that people just didn't know about. And there was a Corvair van spring that you could just stick in a 55 Chevrolet A-frame, and it was perfect.
Really?
Didn't even have to put a jack screw in it.
Really? Now, is this a strong spring or a weaker spring?
It's a strong spring, but not as what people were running back in those days. Is they were getting a railroad car spring and putting it in there. And they would take and put a Gabriel shock on it that was built for a truck that it was so stiff that, it just, at the time, people didn't really understand about how to make a chassis work. But that car of Billy's was, and it had all of this stuff on there, and it worked really good. Bobby had given me some information about how to build rear springs by taking a leaf spring and an anvil and a hammer and beating the spring out. There was some knowledge that was gained from other people that we put in there. But I remember the last race of the season, and I told Billy, I said, now, it had been raining, and this is when we actually went from Friday night to Sundays.
Okay.
That's why I say the last race. Because Gloor had this deal about whenever high school football started, racing stopped on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the weather hung out, they usually would try to run on a little bit later. And I told Billy, I said, now, Billy, the racetrack is damp. I said, don't do anything stupid on the first lap. Telling Billy that was like telling a locomotive not to crank up. And what does he do? But he runs off in the first corner, and it's wet, and it's up into the guardrail and wads it out.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Clark and I had a little bit of disagreement about money, and so he took all the car away and gave it to Chester to take care of.
Yeah.
And kind of got off of me a little bit. At the time, I had been working at a place called Taylor Speed Sport, which was a speed shop, machine shop on Vesper Road, a block up the street from Dan's Tavern.
Right, yeah.
So there was a customer that would come in, and the people that owned the speed shop, Wally Taylor, had traded out carpet for his house for a motor for this kid that owned Lawrence. His dad owned Lawrence Carpet, and his name was Don Lawrence. And so Don had bolted together this 55 Chevrolet. You could tell it was built by somebody that didn't know what was doing. But anyhow, right. Don had tried to go out and run it one time and was not very successful. And because of his association with Wally in the machine shop and everything, he was talking to me, and he said, "Why don't we team up?"
Okay.
He said, "Let's put a car together." And so he and I together, his old motor that I had actually built at Taylor for that, and we put a car together, and that was the 55 Chevrolet white with a black vinyl top with a number 1 on it.
Wow.
That was the original. That's where the paint scheme came from.
That's amazing.
And that year at Birmingham, I won 14 in a row.
Wow. This is in the cadet division again?
It's the cadet division.
Okay.
So
how's Billy running at this time?
There, he was there.
Okay, yeah. So a little vindication there.
Yeah, a little bit of vindication, and I think Billy wore Chester out, and golly, trying to think of whose name Mr. Clark hired to build him a car. Yeah, they had a car, and I think I'm not picking up. Sternenberg drove it.
Okay.
Sternenberg drove it.
Is that Bill Sternberg?
Bill Sternenberg
drove
it.
Okay.
And they were successful. They ran good.
So you know, winning 14 races that year.
Yeah, 14 races, and Gloor had Tom Gloor owned the racetrack or ran the racetrack, and he put a bounty on me.
Right.
And this kid out of Montgomery named Price Donuts.
Donuts was his last name?
He had a donut shop.
I got you. Okay.
His name was Price. But anyhow, he waited on me, a back marker. He waited on me and stuck me in the wall.
Wow.
For the bounty. And didn't hurt me real bad. I dislocated my shoulder and did a couple of things. But so I was out for 2 or 3 weeks trying to rebuild a car. And I came back, won 11 in a row.
Golly, that's unreal.
Still ran second to Richard Orton in
Yeah.
the championship because Richard ran all the races that I didn't get to run.
Right.
Richard probably was my most competitive
Yeah.
person, and I'd always get funny. Richard drove for Bobby Ray Jones, and they would do everything. They had Bobby Woods come out there, and he would ice the motor down and just all sorts of stuff. But, you know, and the whole deal here is you need to understand that I am not a good driver. Really am not. I was not. I was okay, but I wasn't really great. The thing that made me successful is I had a better piece of equipment than anybody.
Yeah, you worked hard.
Because I could build it, and I would build pieces carburetors back then were the big deal. Everybody thought they could take a carburetor out of a box and bolt it on. And carburetors and distributors and ignition, just stupid stuff that you don't even think about. Headers.
Yeah, but you did, and that's the cool thing about it is you did think about all that, Lee, and you took every part, every piece that you could work on, and you massaged it and made it better,
And that was the whole deal. Like I said, I wasn't a good driver. I just had a better. I probably passed more cars in the corner than I ever passed down the straightaway.
Yeah. We were talking the other day, and matter of fact, when I was writing the intro about you, there's not many guys that can do all of it. There's drivers and there's engine builders and all that stuff and car builders, but to have one guy that is willing to dig in on every aspect of it, again, creates a product like you're talking about, a superior product. And that's all.
And I think the background in aviation gave me some of the knowledge to be innovative. And
right.
I mean, really enjoyed the aviation field. And
what can you tell us about this stuff here, brother?
Oh goodness, those look like engines that came from Dan Wells that we used in the Micro Midgets. Neither one of those are ones I built. Ones I built had a 1/4-inch spacer in here because it was stroked.
Oh, okay, good deal. All right,
but, they still. And also, one of the engines were the one that Pat Sewell won some kind of motorcycle deal in Daytona with.
Oh, okay, wow.
That was an engine that Dan Wells had, and we bought it and put it in a Micro Midget.
Okay. Well, this
I'll tell you though, that's about as antique as you can get.
Well, this here is supposedly you've seen this in your past. I don't know if this is accurate or not.
Oh yeah. That's one of the original Micro Midgets that, I don't remember who built this one. I believe Billy Reeves.
Okay. It came from Ernie Spangler.
Spangler?
Yeah.
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 Billy Reeves was a real talented fabricator, contractor, but built just a lot of, and the reason I say it's Billy Reeves because this is the kind of work that he did, hand laid aluminum where you, I mean, this was made out of a sheet of aluminum.
Wow.
And the front axle is out from under a Crosley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what a Crosley is?
I think I've seen one before.
And you'd be surprised. But that's what.
Airplane seat.
Oh yeah.
Frame,
well,
or
fabricated.
right. I got you. Okay.
That was an old military seat belt.
Yeah.
Gosh, a lot of memories here.
I guess the steering wheel was just cut off basically for them to be able to fit in it and drive it.
Yeah, I mean, just to clear your legs.
Yeah, right.
If you can see, the turning radius on it was very short.
Right, yeah. What about this brake apparatus?
Yeah, that's just a friction brake.
Just to whoa it up?
Yeah, well,
It wouldn't stop it.
yeah, it'll stop it.
Well,
It would do better than you would think it would do.
Yeah. I think that plate's all wrong for that one.
I was going to say that doesn't look like that looks like something that somebody added to put a
Go-kart engine on it.
either probably a lawnmower engine.
Okay, yeah. And is this crude building here just with that one plate holding that? Is that? I guess that was.
That's
I don't know.
I don't know whether that's been modified or not, but I mean it.
Yeah.
Typical straight axle.
Yeah. Good.
And you see that frame. That frame is probably some kind of automotive frame that was cut up.
Okay, narrowed.
And drilled all into the hole.
Yeah.
Just people had all sorts of ideas back in those days of what to do.
Now, was that axle, did they have all those holes drilled in, or was that?
No, that was drilled.
Okay, that was drilled, okay.
Yeah, it didn't come that way from the factory.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Yeah, that's what that is. That's a Crosley front axle. One time I worked for Tom Gloor,
Yeah,
Chevrolet, and this was the highlight of the Corvairs.
okay.
And if you remember earlier, my wife owned a Corvair. That
Yes,
was
sir.
her first car,
Yeah,
a red Corvair. And all the mechanics, all of them, Goodwin and Robert Rocket, all of them, they hated the Corvair.
right.
Hated them. So I told the service manager, Ralph, can't think of his last name. Anyhow, I told him, I says, look, I'll take every Corvair that comes in the door,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody else gets them.
Right,
And no complaints.
right.
And I said, if there's none here, then that's fine. But if there's 50 here,
Yeah.
I get them all.
Wow.
And Ralph, boy, he just jumped on that. It made everybody happy. Gloor was good about we had a weekly meeting every week, and he would furnish a barbecue or something. Really, really a great guy. Tom Gloor was a step above the best.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody say anything.
Oh no,
It was just always praise.
he was a quality individual and knew about business, knew how to treat people.
Yeah.
Just real good. So back in the day of the Corvairs, they were notorious about leaking
Mhm.
oil. God, I mean, most people that had a Corvair carried at least a case of oil with them.
Right.
So anyhow, I got where, excuse me, I got where that I would say that 60% of the Corvairs come in were oil leaks.
Right.
So I just went to a junkyard and bought an old Corvette motor
Yeah.
because all the motors were the same. I mean,
Right.
there was very little difference in them. And I took it and rebuilt it and sealed it up. So they'd run a Corvair in with a oil leak, and then I'd pop the motor out, stick another motor in it in like 2 hours, where
Right.
normally it would pay like 8 to 10 hours to do a rebuild on it.
Right.
Well, nobody ever complained because we made it price conscious. It was very reasonable.
Mhm.
And there would be days that I'd have 3 or 4 cars to work on and didn't have time, so I'd farm them out to Rocket and I couldn't give them a bad job. I'd have to give them a simple one.
Right. Yeah.
But it worked out real well. And then they had a service manager. Actually, he wasn't a service manager. He was the person that dished out the work. And he didn't like the idea that I was swapping the motors out. And so just one day, it flew apart, and being the person that I was, I just loaded my toolbox up and left.
Called it a day.
That was it.
Tell me about. Let's go back to the point of you start to work for Bobby, and what brings that deal about?
You have to back up a little bit
Okay.
there. After the cadet year and really we probably ought to go into Don first.
Okay, let's do it.
I think that's better.
All right.
This kid named Don Lawrence, dad, owned Lawrence Carpet.
That's right.
And Don was a real technical person, workaholic. I mean, just never unbelievable. And a lot of our success with the race car is nothing ever fell off or nothing ever broke.
Now, he had no military experience. He was just that kind of person.
That's correct.
Okay.
He was, if I'm not mistaken, he was a Catholic school trained.
Wow.
But anyhow, and Don was just a real innovator. And we finished the year with a cadet car, and then I built a sportsman car that I showed you a picture of.
Yeah, you did.
One that was parked in front of World Transmission. That car got run a few times, and it got totaled at Birmingham. Billy Jack Gregg decided that he needed to turn right before turn one, and I got wadded up in the guardrail. But that's neither here and there. That's gone. That Don was just real innovative, and he had met Bobby, and we'd been involved with that, and Bobby offered Don a job working for Mario Rossi, taking care of actually both the super speedway and the short track car.
And that car is housed where at this time?
That was in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Okay.
That was where.
So Don moves up there?
Don picks his family up, wife and 2 kids, and moves up there to Spartanburg. And
did you feel like that was a good move for him at the time?
Oh yeah,
you did.
Yeah. But Don had this set in his mind that he wanted to do so many years, and if he hadn't accomplished something in that period of time, that he'd go on.
Okay.
And in that time that he worked for Mario before Bobby changed from Chrysler to Ford, they didn't win a championship, so Don picks up his family and everything and moves to New Mexico and becomes an Indian chief.
No kidding. So Bobby had to be pretty impressed with him.
Oh, everybody was impressed with him.
Okay, so yeah,
He was, I mean.
His name doesn't get mentioned a lot. I think this,
it's just because of the time transition.
Fast.
Jake Elder and Harry Hyde and Woods Brothers, all of them had a lot of respect for Don.
Yeah, wow.
Because Don was very innovative.
Wow,
He was hyper on everything and that was part of Bobby's success.
Yeah.
At this period of time, I had worked. Bobby had asked me to go to Chrysler and work up in doing the Chrysler motors. And
let's back up for a second before we get into that. You guys. Don wasn't involved with you with the Buick, was he, or is that
no?
Prior to,
he was not.
Okay, yeah.
Don didn't have anything to do with the Buick.
Okay.
The Buick was just I had worked at Drennan's Chrysler Buick, Drennan Cadillac Buick downtown, and that's where my association with Wayne Ferguson came in, and helped them make, and he won a couple of races, but I mean, just that was the start of it, and that's how the Buick deal came in. And it was kind of a crazy deal because at the time I was trying to work with Anthony Artala and them on their transition to a sportsman car. They had built a really nice 57 sportsman car, and and when the Buick deal came along, I told Anthony, I said, it's something I just can't turn down.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, man, I know this driver. I mean, this guy probably just win all the races. He says, well, who is he? I said, his name is Neil Bonnett.
Mm-hmm.
I said, never heard of him. I said, well, you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so Neil actually ended up driving for Anthony and them and B&H Motors, and had a very successful.
Yes, he did.
2 championships, I believe.
Yes.
But you have to understand that Neil, the simple description of Neil, I mean, there are so many stories about Neil, it's unbelievable, but the key thing about Neil was he had more determination than anybody I ever met.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
He wanted to do it, period.
Right.
And that's how he got involved with Bobby. That's how he got involved with everybody. I mean,
pure determination.
Pure determination. And that, he and Earnhardt were really close friends. And, he was driving an Earnhardt car when he got killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Testing tires for Hoosier.
Yeah.
At Daytona.
Wow.
Real sad deal. But he had already had a major accident before and had the thing that everybody's bringing out now about concussion.
Right. Yeah.
He was recommended by the doctors, don't drive a car again, and
right.
And that's what happens.
All right. You end up working for Bobby.
I end up working for Bobby and Mario, and I'm working. Bobby decides to bring the short track car to Hueytown, so we build a garage down there and an engine shop, and I'm doing work with a couple of the machine shops around Bessemer, and the next thing I know is they close up.
Okay.
And so that's how I got involved with the K&T Equipment Company.
Okay.
Deal there. And I went to Bobby one day and I said, I got an opportunity to be a part of this machine shop. And I said, I don't want to walk away from you. He said, well, let me ease your thoughts. He said, I just signed a contract with Hallman and Moody.
Wow.
And so the Chrysler program is going to be dead.
You were telling me the other day about a story about you and a guy named Chuck Looney was taking this race car to Hickory, North Carolina.
Yeah, this is a major story that very few people will understand or know. But that year was 1970.
Okay.
And Bobby had run second in Daytona to the 71 car. I think the 71 car won the race. And so we had the short track car, which was a 70 model Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, it had the old round chrome bumper in the front of it.
Correct.
Looked like a fish mouth.
That's correct, yeah.
Big thing. And we were running this car out of Hueytown, and it was loaded up. And Bobby had this system that he had Chester build a trailer that to Bobby's specification. It was a nice trailer, but Bobby had this deal that he wanted a piece on the car, and he would pull the two front tires against 2 ramps, and he had a chain ratchet.
Okay. That
it was hooked to the center of the cross member into the trailer, and that's what he tied it down with. It had no chocks behind the rear wheels, had no tie downs on the rear wheels, just that. I mean, it was, for running Birmingham and Montgomery and places like that was great.
That's right, yeah.
And that was the mentality that was thought about at the time.
Easy.
Loaded on a trailer, bang, 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 we're at the race. Because racers were always late.
Right, yeah.
No matter what you did, if you were a late racer, you were a winner.
That's right, yeah.
If you were there early, you were a back marker.
That's right.
So anyhow, Chuck and I worked all night doing motor, and Chuck and all them had loaded the trailer up. And at the time, Dodge had given Bobby a Dodge van to pull with. I'm in the right seat asleep. Now, this is the 70s, so there's no interstate between Birmingham and where we're going. We're going to Hickory.
Yep.
Which is the second race of the season. We're headed down the road, and I'm asleep, or semi asleep, in the right front, and I feel all of a sudden the Chuck jumped, and I hear Chuck say, "Oh," well, and then The next thing I know is we're turning around in the middle of the road. I said, "What's wrong?" The race car came off the trailer.
Oh, my.
Oh, I mean, this is devastating. We turn around and we go back. The dust is still settling
Right.
when we get there. And this race car had come off the trailer, and you can see the tire marks. It came off the trailer, and it took a left turn. If it had been 20 feet earlier, it had been a dirt bank.
Right.
If it had been 20 feet later, it would have been a filling station.
Okay.
Front window. Instead, it hit 5 used cars that were between the dirt bank and the filling station. And it actually, one of them old Ford Fairlanes, it actually broke the front part of it in two.
Oh, my goodness.
And like I said, we just drove up there and the dust is still settling, and I get out and start looking around. The next thing I know, here comes a guy running across the street in his bathrobe.
Okay.
And he looks at me and he looks at that and he looks at everything. He says, "What happened?" I said, "Well, the race car came off and hit these used cars." The next thing I know is this guy runs over to the used cars and takes a shoe polish bottle,
Right.
and he starts putting ones
In front of all the prices.
on the prices on the windshield. Back in those days, you just wrote the price on the windshield.
True.
So the $750 car turned into a $1,750.
He's waiting on the insurance
That
man.
was kind of comical. The next thing that happens is the Georgia Highway Patrol. This is Bremen, Georgia is where it happened.
All right.
The Georgia Highway Patrol gets there, and he's writing it all up. And he asked me, he says, "What do you think the value of that car is?" I said, $50,000. And he looked at me, he said, "You're crazy." I said, "No." He said, "I'm fixing to call a wrecker to get it loaded up." I said, "Get a wrecker for who?" "Well, load your car up." I said, "No, I'll take care of the car."
Uh-huh.
And I pry the hood. I mean, you have to understand, this is a 70 model Dodge race car.
Right.
I pry the hood up and I take my knife and I cut the fan belt off because I knew the radiator was pushed into the fan.
Sure.
I get in the car, crank it up, and I drive it and put it on the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing that happens is Chuck says, "You got to call Bobby."
So he puts all this on you.
I said, "Chuck, no, you call Bobby. You were driving. I can't do it." And you'd have to know Chuck. Chuck's a real mild-mannered person, but great guy.
Yes.
So I said, "Okay, I will." So I go over to the payphone, and it's payphone now.
Right.
I don't have a cell phone. I don't have any payphone. I pick up the phone.
Early in the morning, I think.
This is probably, it might have been 5:30, 6 o'clock, maybe.
Right.
Phone rings. Bobby answers. I said, "Bobby, there's been an accident, but nobody's been hurt."
Mm-hmm.
Remember what I said.
I do.
"Bobby, there's been an accident and nobody's been hurt. What do you think?" I said, "The car's wadded up pretty bad." He said, "Well, bring it back to Hueytown," which was probably the worst mistake that I made. I should have said, "No, we'll take it to the racetrack and we'll make it work."
Right.
Because this one race that Bobby did, he didn't receive any kind of points. He drove Jabe Thomas's old car. I don't finish somewhere. I don't know where, but I mean, finished
Yeah,
the
not
race.
enough points.
But Jabe got all the points. He lost the championship that year by 75 points
Oh, my.
to Isaacs.
Wow.
If you go back and do and I think that year we had 22 second places to the 71 car.
Wow.
Or not just the 71 car, I think Pearson
And the Petties.
and Petty's.
Yeah.
Those were really the three juniors cars. There was 4 cars that really were dominant.
Right. Yeah.
We were competitive.
Very
No
much.
question about that.
Yeah.
But that cost Bobby a championship in 1970.
Wow.
So that's the story on. I mean, this leads into another story that we're going to skip a bit of time. But when Bobby had his major wreck in Pocono,
Yeah.
you know, the guy drove up into same deal. Drove up into the left door, and I mean,
Yeah.
in all rational things, it should have killed Bobby.
That's correct.
But didn't. And Mario Rossi and Paul Newman were key people in the Pennsylvania area, and they made sure he got the best attention that could be possible.
Right.
And after a transition period in Pennsylvania, Bobby was to the level that he could come back to Birmingham, and they brought him back to Birmingham and put him in Lakeshore Foundation for Rehabilitation. And Judy was Bobby's wife, but she was a very firm person, and she wouldn't let anybody come see him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't question that, but I mean, it was kind of crazy. But I had a couple of nurses over there that I knew at Lakeshore, and I knew that Judy would go home at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon before she would come back.
Right.
So I would slip over and go in the back door. And there's several good stories about this, but one of the stories is Bobby crawled out of the bed, was crawling on the floor, and a nurse opened the door and hit him in the head.
Oh,
It was the first time that he hadn't seen double.
Oh, really?
Before that, I mean, all he was
Really?
seeing was double, and had all sorts of problems. So they got him restrained back in the bed and everything. And the first time that I went in, I walked in the door. He's in the bed. He looks at me and he says, "There's been an accident, but somebody's been hurt."
Oh.
And the nurse was standing there, and she said, "That's the first coherent thing I've ever heard him say."
Wow. So he recognizes you.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just letting you know.
He said, "There's been an accident," and he said, "Somebody has been hurt."
Wow.
And we talk about that, and tears flow. It's just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The next thing that happens is Newman calls.
Paul Newman.
And I had some affiliation with Paul. I had built him a car, a street car for he and his wife, because Joanne Woodard wouldn't fly in an airplane. Paul got 3 airplanes.
Okay.
Nice airplanes.
Right.
She wouldn't even fly on a commercial plane. So if they went somewhere from Connecticut where they lived to California, they drove.
Wow.
And so I built him a Volvo station wagon, which is what he wanted, and repowered it with a Buick Grand National motor that Bobby had won from Buick when he drove from Buick.
Okay.
But anyhow, Paul calls and he says, "I got to see Bobby." I said, "Well, Judy's not going to let you." He said, "Yeah." He said, "But I know you." I said, "Look." He flew down. I picked him up at the airport, and we go over, and I know she goes. And so we go in the back door.
This is after Bobby's improved somewhat?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Not a lot, but
yeah.
I had brought him a carburetor and a screwdriver to take apart. And so,
okay. Yeah.
I mean, he'd progressed, but he still looked, still had some distortion on the side of his head. I mean, you have to understand, this car drove up into half of his body.
No doubt.
It's amazing.
Yes.
That this man had survived. But anyhow, Paul and I walk in the back door, and we go to the room, and Paul walks in and he sees Bobby, and I mean, he just burst into tears, and he goes over, first thing he does, picks up the phone. He says, calls Mario Andretti.
Really?
"I'm in the room, I've seen."
How about that?
And they share that deal there.
To be a part of that was pretty
Judy
big.
found out about all that, boy, and I mean, she really gave me a hard time. But
those
I
don't
don't regret anything.
Those are key people that he needed to see, and
they needed to see him.
Yeah, and Paul, you've seen a lot of pictures of Bobby and Paul during the years, but you didn't realize that they created that kind of a bond and a relationship. But
unbelievable.
Yeah, that's
Mario also.
Yeah,
and we're talking about people who are, gosh,
icons.
No question about that.
No doubt.
Just you wouldn't think of the friendship between them.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. That's like I said, those pictures you would have thought maybe could have just been they met each other or whatever, but again, the relationships must have been.
And it was a good relationship.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I don't regret anything that I ever did with the Lakeshore deal.
Yeah.
And you know, and Bobby today, you know, he survived it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
he just spent the weekend at Daytona. He spent.
Yeah.
I don't know if he went to Fontana or not.
Yeah. But so you went ahead and you had a great career with putting this guy here in this number one car.
Oh yeah, well that you know that Neil and Butch and Anthony they really gelled together, and Butch, you'd have to know Butch Nelson to understand, but Butch would buy a motor from me, and he said, "Now I ain't gonna pay you if it don't win."
Yeah, right.
but I'll pay you that if it wins. I'll pay you that night. He said, "If it don't win, it might be a week or two."
He had to work the angles.
So I had to work real hard to make it win, and it was real funny. Is you know, we'd win on Friday night. Well, I say we. Neil would win on Friday night, and somebody'd buy the motor out of the car.
Wow.
From Butch.
Okay.
So I had to have another motor ready.
Yeah. For
the next week, and one time I ran out of motor pieces, and I had built a motor for Denny Ruiz.
Yes.
And so I put Denny's motor in the car.
Oh, me.
And we go to Montgomery, and Denny walked by, and he looked over in there, and he come over to me, and he says, "That's my motor in that car." I said, "Yeah, I ran out of parts." I said, "But you got a motor." I mean,
so you were building motors for multiple people back then, right? Or how many were you building for?
Yeah, I was real fortunate that there were some really good years that 71 through 75 that were really good years. I built a bunch of, back then, I mean, you know, a full tilt motor was $3,500.
Wow.
$3,800.
Wow. Yeah.
A big one. And I carried about 4 motors to Pensacola for the snowball, and had a bunch of motors in it. Motor won it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Dickie Davis.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Won it. So you know, and then in 75 was a problem year, that the people I was in partners with on the machine shop had some trouble with the IRS, and the IRS came down and locked the doors.
Oh.
And I asked him, I said, "Well, why you lock the doors?" He said, "Well, you're a part of a sister company to that company." He said, anyhow, it ended up, I had made an offer to buy the 2 partners out. Needless to me that I never understood that they were father and son-in-law.
Wow.
Just never, you know, he was Bruce Thomas, he was Jim Thomas, and he was Bruce Key. Just never realized to me that I was was dealing with family. But anyhow, I ended up buying their parts out, and I did that, and we settled everything on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I come to work on Thursday morning. There's a sheriff there, and he says, "I'm here to evict you. This is from the building that's over on Lum Avenue where we're built." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, it seems like that the building you're in is leased from the Double L Barbecue, and it has a statement in there that you can't sublease."
Really?
"So we're gonna move you out." I said, "Well, you start with that big piece of equipment over there first." He says, "Look," he says, "how long will it take you to get out?" He said, I'll put everything off." So, and this was not a terrible transition time, but because I had like 5 American Motors race cars that I was supporting, engine wise, and maintaining.
So how does that deal come about for you?
I had done a lot of work for American Motors on some projects for different things, and just
Okay.
it's just an accumulation of it. One of the key guys was Gene Felton out of Atlanta, and people gravitate towards a winner, and he's
Yeah.
a winner, so
Yeah.
it just appeared that way. But I had all these cars were up in an old dilapidated warehouse up in Birmingham that belonged to a doctor friend
Mm-hmm.
that had this warehouse. It was empty, and he said the insurance is just running him crazy because it's empty. He said, if you'll move in there, he said, rent will be $1,500 a month, and it will save him a ton of money on insurance.
Right.
So I had all the race cars in there, and so we just took and transitioned the machine shop up into that building there, and that's what was in that building there on 4th and 14th for 29 years.
Wow, long time.
And did a lot of crazy things. Worked on
Y'all got into working on exotic cars and all that. I mean,
I gravitated towards cars that people wouldn't work on.
okay, yeah.
That way,
You're in demand.
Demand, and it doesn't have any dollar limitations on it.
That's right. Yeah.
You can pretty well control what you're doing. Those were good, fortunate years.
Yeah.
There, and then and as everything happens, the doctor calls me one day and he says, I got to triple your rent. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you either got to move out or triple your rent. I said, well, I mean, tripling my rent, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, you need to find you another building. I said, what's going on? He said, well, UAB wants to buy this building.
Wow.
Okay. So I start looking for a building, and we find one a couple of blocks up the street. That story is another story in itself. But,
Well, you've had a storied career, and it's
a lot of interesting things. A lot of great people helped me. A lot of support.
Well, like you said, you were a winner. You got involved with a bunch of winners, and you created a relationship that they helped you and you helped them. And
well, that's what it should be.
It's
it's give and take.
It is.
So, there are a lot of stories we could go on forever. I don't need to take your time up like that, but
no, we'll call it a day here. We spent probably an hour and a half so here, and we'll come back and we'll revisit and again more of these stories. That's what everybody out here, I hope, wants to listen to and wants to be a part of. And
we just have to see.
Yeah.
But you can educate this thing down to about 2-3 minutes, it'd be okay.
Yeah, no, we're gonna do a lot better than that. We're gonna do really good. I really appreciate you taking your time today, Lee. You've been very kind to me through the years, and
I still try to work every day.
Yeah.
In April will be 82.
Wow.
So, but I don't feel 82. My body is 82, but
yeah.
I just enjoy working. I'm fortunate that I have been able to make a living and support a family with a hobby.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And
so.
And again, I know the people there's so many people in this community that it's just blows your mind, the relationships that you created.
There's stories about every one of them.
Yeah.
It always, there was something that that was a conversational piece with every one of them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's a life well lived, you gotta.
I think so.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
I'm happy.
Yeah, I think it is a life well lived. And again, I thank you so much for taking your time today to come share it with us.
I think you need to be commended to try to run this program. I think it's an interesting thing. It's good that they've got somebody your level to support it.
Well, thank you. And it's.
I think you'll find the rewards of it.
I think I already have. I mean, again, just minding your relationship, even becoming better, and you answering my text as soon as I called. I really appreciate that. And again, it means a lot to have friends.
I agree.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot, Lee. Thanks for being here.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Rings, Gears, and Opinions. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. We'll have a new show out for you next Tuesday. We hope to see you there.